My grandmother's dying wish seemed like the ramblings of an old woman clinging to the past. "Take my violin to the pier by Sunset Beach," she whispered, her frail hand trembling in mine. "Play the songs I taught you. Promise me you'll play." At the time, I thought it was just sentimental nonsense. After all, she was 85, and I was 28, too old to indulge in such whimsical requests. But there was something in her voice, something that made me pause. Grandma Evelyn had always been the one person who truly believed in my music, even when I didn't believe in myself. Still, her request felt more like the ramblings of someone nearing the end of her life, not a final, life-changing command. Little did I know, it was the very thing I needed to hear. I had spent the last 5 years in New York City chasing my dream of becoming a classical violinist. But instead of concert halls and grand stages, all I had were rejection letters, failed auditions, and mounting debt. Every day felt like a fight. I worked 2 part-time jobs, teaching violin lessons during the day and working as a barista in the evenings, just to pay the rent on my tiny, overcrowded apartment. It was so small, I could barely fit my violin case anywhere, let alone play. I was living on empty promises, hoping for a breakthrough that never came. I was 2 months behind on rent and had maxed out my credit cards, the letters of rejection from orchestras piling up on the desk like a constant reminder that I wasn't good enough. "Thank you for your submission, but we've decided to move forward with other candidates." It was always the same message, just with a different name and a different orchestra. A polite rejection, every time. I had almost convinced myself that maybe I wasn't cut out for this, that maybe I should just give up, return home, and find a stable job where I could settle down, stop the constant grind of chasing a dream that wasn't ever going to come true. The final blow came one afternoon when I received a call from the New York Philharmonic, a place I had dreamed of playing for since I was a child. I had allowed myself to hope, even though I had been let down so many times before. Maybe this time would be different. The call came while I was sitting in my car, parked outside the cafe where I worked. The voice on the phone was professional, kind, but distant. "Hello, Rachel. This is Heather from the Philharmonic. We've reviewed your audition, and while your performance was impressive, we're looking for a sound that fits our current needs a little better." The same message, dressed up a little more politely. I hung up, feeling numb. There it was, the final confirmation that I wasn't good enough, that my dream was just that, a dream. I sat there in my car, staring out the window, fighting the tears that threatened to spill. The weight of it all, the debt, the rejections, the loneliness, it was too much. I was on the edge, ready to give up on everything. I called my mom. "I think it's time to come home," I said, my voice shaky. "I've tried. I just don't think I'm meant for this." She didn't hesitate. "Sweetheart, we've been worried about you. Your old school called last week. They have a position open for a music teacher. You could come home, live with us, and finally get some stability." I felt the relief in her voice, and I knew what she was offering. A way out, a chance to stop struggling. But at what cost? The thought of giving up, of turning my back on everything I had worked for, made my heart ache. It felt like failure, but it also felt like safety. I drove to my grandmother's house that night, the car's headlights slicing through the darkness as I navigated the winding road. The weight of my mom's words hung in the air, but it was the thought of Grandma Evelyn that filled my mind. She had been my first music teacher, the one who put the violin in my hands when I was 5, teaching me not just to play, but to feel the music, to breathe with it. She was the only person who had never doubted me, even when I was unsure of myself. As I drove, the doubt that had clouded my mind all day began to settle into a heavy silence. I was about to give up on everything I'd worked for, to walk away from the one dream that had ever mattered to me. I couldn't help but wonder if Grandma Evelyn had ever faced this kind of crossroads, if she had ever felt the same crushing weight of failure. When I arrived, her house was quiet, the only sound the soft rustling of the trees outside. I found her in the living room, lying on the couch, looking frail but still very much herself. Her eyes sparkled with recognition as I walked in. "There's my girl," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I was hoping you'd come." I sat down beside her, the years of distance between us melting away as we talked. We talked about my life in New York, The failures, the struggles, the moments of hope that were always dashed by another rejection. I told her about the constant grind of trying to make it as a violinist, the endless auditions, the bills piling up. She listened, her eyes soft and understanding. I tried to keep the conversation light, to hide the rawness of how I was feeling, but she could see right through me. "You're thinking about quitting, aren't you?" she asked, her voice calm but knowing. I swallowed hard, the lump in my throat making it difficult to speak. "I don't know, Grandma. Maybe it's time to be practical. Maybe Mom's right. Maybe I've tried long enough, and I'm just not cut out for this." She was silent for a moment, her gaze turned toward the window. The quiet stretched between us, and for the first time, I could see the weight of regret in her eyes. "Rachel, let me tell you something about regret," she said, her voice steady. "It's heavier than anything else in this world. Heavier than failure, heavier than debt. It never gets lighter." I didn't fully understand. "What do you mean?" She looked at me then, her eyes filled with a sadness I hadn't seen before. "I had my chance, Rachel. I could have been more than I was. I could have followed my music, traveled the world, taken that audition. But I let fear take over. I let other people tell me to be practical, and I've regretted it every single day since." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. The regret in her voice was palpable, and I suddenly realized that her request for me to take the violin to Sunset Beach wasn't just about the music. It was about something bigger, a lesson she wanted to pass down to me. "I don't want that for you," she continued, her voice softening. "You have the talent. You have the heart. Don't let fear steal your dreams, Rachel. Don't live with the regret of not even trying." I sat there, holding her hand, my mind racing. Could I really walk away from everything I had worked for? Could I choose to follow my passion, even if it meant risking everything? Grandma Evelyn had made her choice years ago, and now she was asking me to make mine. She asked me to do something that felt impossible. "In my closet, there's an old violin case," she said. "Take it to the pier by Sunset Beach. It's where I started. Play the songs I taught you. Promise me, Rachel." I didn't fully understand why, but I promised her. 2 days later, she passed away in her sleep, leaving me with more than just a violin. She left me the courage to take a leap. After Grandma Evelyn passed away, I found myself standing in front of her closet, staring at the old violin case she had mentioned. It was worn, the leather cracked from years of use, but when I opened it, the violin inside was breathtaking. The wood was rich with age, the curves of the instrument smooth and familiar. It was the violin she had used to chase her dreams before she settled into a quieter life. The same violin that had taught me how to embrace the music, not just play it. I ran my fingers over it gently, as if the act itself could somehow bring her back for just a moment. I didn't know what to expect as I drove to Sunset Beach the next morning. The sun was barely rising, casting a golden light across the horizon, and the air was crisp, like the world was holding its breath. I parked by the pier and got out of the car, the sound of waves crashing against the shore filling the silence. I looked at the wide expanse of ocean before me, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a strange sense of peace. The pier stretched out into the water, empty, except for the seagulls perched along the posts, watching me. I set the violin case down carefully on the wooden planks, just as Grandma had asked. My heart was racing. Part of me felt ridiculous, like I was just fulfilling some sentimental request that meant nothing. But another part of me, the part I had buried under the weight of rejection and self-doubt, felt something stir deep inside. This was it. This was the moment where I had to decide, to keep running from my dreams or to stand still and face them, just like Grandma had once done. I opened the case and took the violin out, my hands trembling. I stood there for a few moments, unsure of where to begin. The wind pulled at my hair, but I barely noticed. I could almost feel her presence behind me, encouraging me, urging me to play. I drew the bow across the strings, and the first notes of meditation, a piece she had taught me years ago, floated into the air, carried by the wind. The sound seemed to belong to the ocean itself, blending with the rhythm of the waves. It was like the music and the world around me were one. I played the songs Grandma had taught me, each note filled with emotion, with memories of our time together. The violin felt like an extension of my body, as though it was telling the story of my fears, my hopes, and my regrets. The music was no longer just an art. It was a conversation, a connection to something bigger than myself. As I played, a figure appeared at the edge of the pier. He was older, well-dressed in a way that didn't quite match the casual atmosphere of the beach. He stood there quietly, watching me, his face unreadable. I kept playing, not stopping to acknowledge him. There was something about his presence that felt different, like he was waiting for something. When I finished the piece, the man slowly approached, his footsteps cautious but deliberate. He stopped a few feet away from me, his eyes focused on the violin in my hands. "Excuse me," he said, his voice surprisingly soft. "That violin, where did you get it?" I blinked, momentarily startled by his question. "It was my grandmother's," I replied, unsure of why he was so interested. "She passed away recently." The man's face went pale, and he took a step closer, his expression now one of shock. "Your grandmother," he murmured. "Her name was Evelyn, right?" I nodded, still confused. "Yes, she was a musician. She taught me to play." The man's eyes softened, and I saw a glimmer of something deeper in them, something I couldn't quite place. "I'm Isaac," he said, his voice tinged with emotion. "We were partners decades ago. I've been searching for her for years." The world seemed to stop in that moment. Isaac. He was the man in the photograph I had found at Grandma's house, the one she had always talked about, the musical partner she had lost. Isaac and Evelyn had once shared a dream of performing together, of making it big. But somewhere along the way, their paths had split. Grandma had stayed behind, choosing stability over ambition. Isaac had gone on to other things, and they had lost touch. Now, after all these years, he was standing in front of me, looking at me like I held the key to something he had been searching for. "I never knew she had a granddaughter," Isaac continued, his voice cracking slightly. "She never spoke about you. But I can hear it in your playing, the same fire she had." His words hit me harder than I expected. I felt a deep connection to him in that moment, one that went beyond music. This was about unfinished stories, lost dreams, and the courage to chase them despite the risks. "Can I help you?" Isaac asked, his voice steady now. "Can I help you make the music that she couldn't?" Isaac's words echoed in my mind as I sat there on the pier, the cool breeze ruffling the pages of my sheet music. His offer was unexpected, a lifeline thrown into the ocean of my doubts. I didn't know what to say at first, my heart still racing from the encounter, but I knew deep down this was the turning point I had been waiting for. "I don't know what to say," I finally managed to say, my voice shaky. "I've been struggling for so long, and you're offering me something I didn't even think was possible. My grandmother, she—" I paused, trying to gather my thoughts. "She would have loved to hear you say that. She always spoke about her music, but she never seemed to regret giving it up. She just accepted it. But now, standing here, I feel like I've been living her regret for her." Isaac watched me with a quiet intensity, as though he understood more about me than I was ready to admit. "You're not living her regret, Rachel," he said, his voice calm but firm. "You're the one who has the chance to do what she couldn't, what she might have wanted for herself if she hadn't let fear hold her back." His words sank in deeper than I wanted them to. He was right. My grandmother had always believed in me, even when I didn't believe in myself. She had handed me this violin not just to play, but to carry on her unfulfilled dreams, to live the life she had put on hold. And now, standing in front of me, Isaac was offering me a way to make those dreams a reality, not just for me, but for her too. "Let me help you," Isaac said again, more gently this time. "I've seen talent like yours before, Rachel, but it's more than just talent. It's heart. That's what makes you stand out." He paused, giving me a moment to absorb what he was saying. "I've been in the industry long enough to know what it takes, and I know what it takes to make music that matters. Let me help you find your place in it." I looked down at my violin, my fingers still gripping the bow, and I felt the weight of the decision pressing down on me. This was the moment where I had to stop running from my dreams. I had spent so many years chasing something that always seemed just out of reach, but maybe it was time to stop chasing and start believing. I looked up at Isaac, meeting his eyes with a newfound resolve. "Okay," I said, my voice firmer now. "Let's do it. Let's make the music that matters." Isaac smiled, a kind of knowing smile, like he had seen this moment coming for years. I knew you'd say that, he said. I've got connections, producers, venues, everything you'll need to get started. But more importantly, I have a plan. You're going to make music that not only showcases your skill, but tells your story. It's going to be real, Rachel. Music that people will feel. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the violin in my hands, but for the first time, it felt right. It felt like I was finally ready to take the leap, to step into the unknown and trust that I was capable of something more than just surviving in this city. I was ready to live the dream my grandmother had passed on to me and to honor the legacy she had left behind. As I packed up the violin and slid it back into the case, I realized something important. I wasn't just doing this for me anymore. I was doing it for Grandma Evelyn, for Isaac, and for the music that had been waiting for me all these years. This was my chance to stop running and start living, and I wasn't about to let it slip away. I met Isaac the next day at a small studio in the heart of the city. The place was nothing like I had imagined, a far cry from the grand concert halls and professional spaces I had dreamed of performing in. It was simple, a bit rundown, but there was something about it that felt real, like it had history and stories to tell. The walls were lined with instruments, old photos of musicians from all walks of life, and gold records that seemed to whisper the promise of dreams realized. Isaac was already there, talking with a few musicians in the corner, his presence commanding yet welcoming. "Rachel." He spotted me as soon as I walked in. "Come on over. I want you to meet some of the people who are going to help shape this journey with you." I smiled nervously, still not entirely sure what I was getting myself into. This was a whole new world, a world I had only dreamed about but never thought I'd actually be a part of. I had spent years sitting in small practice rooms, rehearsing alone, doubting if I was ever going to make it. Now, I was surrounded by real musicians, session players, producers, songwriters, all looking at me like I was the one they'd been waiting for. Isaac introduced me to a man named Marcus, a seasoned producer who had worked with some of the biggest names in the industry. His handshake was firm, and his eyes studied me with an intensity that made me feel both exposed and understood. He didn't say much at first, just nodded as he handed me a microphone. "Let's hear what you've got," he said, his voice gruff but not unkind. I stood in front of the microphone, my heart pounding in my chest. The violin felt heavy in my hands, but also comforting, like an old friend. I played the same song I had been practicing since I was a child, the piece Grandma Evelyn had taught me, Meditation by Massenet. As the bow glided across the strings, I let the music wash over me. The sound filled the room, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel self-conscious. I didn't feel the weight of rejection or doubt. I was just playing, lost in the moment, sharing the music I had carried with me all these years. When I finished, there was a long silence. I looked up, unsure of what to expect. Marcus was staring at me, his lips slightly pursed as he processed what he had heard. Finally, he spoke. "You've got something, Rachel. It's not just technical skill. There's something deeper in your playing, a kind of emotion that connects with people. That's the kind of thing you can't fake. We can work with that." His words hit me harder than I expected. For the first time in my life, someone wasn't just praising my technique or my ability to play the right notes. They were seeing me in the music. It was the first real validation I'd gotten in years, and it was coming from someone who didn't owe me anything. Someone who had worked with some of the most talented musicians in the world. Isaac clapped his hands together, clearly pleased. "That's what I'm talking about," he said with a grin. "That's the magic I've been waiting to see. We're going to make something beautiful out of this, Rachel. Trust me, you've just taken your first step toward your future." As the session continued, I felt something inside me shift. I wasn't just another struggling musician anymore. I was part of something. These weren't just strangers in a room. They were the people who would help me shape the music I had been too afraid to share. Isaac and Marcus believed in me in a way I hadn't believed in myself for years, and I knew that was something I couldn't ignore. By the end of the day, I felt like I had taken a leap not just toward a music career, but toward who I was meant to be. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't thinking about all the reasons I might fail. I was thinking about all the reasons I might succeed. and that was something I hadn't felt in years. The next few weeks passed in a blur of practice sessions, studio recordings, and endless brainstorming. Isaac's confidence in me was infectious, and every day, I felt myself growing more and more into this new version of myself, the artist I had always dreamed of becoming, but never quite believed I could be. The studio became my second home, a place where the walls didn't just echo music, they echoed my own transformation. Marcus, with his sharp eye for detail, worked tirelessly with me to refine every note, every pause, making sure the music wasn't just technically perfect, but emotionally authentic. For the first time, I was crafting something that felt entirely mine. But even in the midst of this creative whirlwind, doubts still crept in, as they always did. Late one night, after a particularly long session, I found myself standing alone in front of the studio window, looking out at the city skyline. The lights blinked in the distance, and for a moment, I felt incredibly small. The weight of everything I was working toward suddenly felt overwhelming. Could I really make it? Was I truly ready to take this leap, knowing how many others had failed before me? What if it all fell apart? I was so deep in my thoughts that I didn't hear Isaac approach. "Hey," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "You look like you're a million miles away." I turned to him, forcing a smile. "I guess I am. Just thinking about everything. This is all happening so fast. I don't know if I'm ready for it." Isaac didn't say anything at first. He just walked over and leaned against the windowsill, his gaze following mine out toward the city. "You know," he began, his voice low and measured, "I've been doing this for a long time. I've seen a lot of people come and go, some with more talent than they knew what to do with, others who had the drive but lacked the skills. But the one thing I've learned is this. Most people don't make it because they're afraid of the risk. They're afraid of putting themselves out there, of being vulnerable." I looked at him, a bit surprised. "You mean you think I'm ready? Even with all my doubt?" He nodded slowly. "I do. But more than that, I think you're ready to own it. Not just your talent, but your story. The journey that brought you here. That's what makes you stand out, Rachel. It's not about being perfect. It's about being real." His words struck a chord deep within me. I had spent so long trying to measure up to some ideal, trying to be the perfect violinist, the perfect musician. I had been so focused on perfection that I hadn't allowed myself to truly be myself in the music. I was always chasing someone else's version of success, someone else's dream. But what Isaac was saying was something different. It was about authenticity, about embracing who I was and where I came from, flaws and all. "I guess I've spent a lot of time hiding from my own story," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. Isaac gave me a soft smile. "We all do. But that's what connects us to people, the parts of us we're afraid to show. You've got a gift, Rachel. Don't hide it anymore." In that moment, everything shifted. I wasn't just a struggling violinist trying to find a way into the industry. I was Rachel, someone who had a story to tell, a journey that had led me to this point. And I realized that the only way I would truly succeed was if I stopped trying to be perfect and started being honest, not just with the world, but with myself. The next day, I walked into the studio with a new sense of purpose. I wasn't just playing the violin. I was playing my heart. Every note, every phrase, felt like it was telling my story, my fears, my dreams. The music no longer felt like a battle to prove myself. It felt like a conversation with the world, one that I was ready to have. And in that moment, I knew that I was no longer the person who had almost given up on her dreams. I was someone who was ready to claim them, fully and completely. The weeks that followed were a blur of excitement and hard work. Isaac and Marcus had managed to pull together a team of musicians, producers, and sound engineers, all of them working toward one goal, helping me shape my debut album. I still couldn't quite wrap my head around it. One minute, I was just another struggling artist, working 2 jobs and barely making ends meet. The next, I was recording in a professional studio with some of the most talented people I had ever met. It all felt like a dream, but the music kept me grounded. Every note I played, every song we worked on, felt like I was getting closer to something I had been chasing for years, something that felt like home. I had written a few songs for the album, but most of the tracks were pieces Grandma Evelyn had taught me. The ones she had played on the same violin I now held in my hands. She had never gotten to share them with the world, but now I was going to make sure her music lived on. The first time I played one of her songs in the studio, the room fell silent. When I finished, Marcus, the producer, looked at me with wide eyes. "Rachel, that was incredible," he said, his voice full of awe. "You're not just playing the notes, you're bringing them to life. There's so much emotion in that." The validation felt like a weight lifting off my shoulders. For so long, I had doubted myself, wondering if I was good enough, wondering if I had what it took. But in that moment, I realized that my story, my struggles, my connection to the music, this was what made it special. I wasn't just another musician. I was telling a story that needed to be heard. Recording the rest of the album was a whirlwind. We spent hours in the studio, layering tracks, adjusting the mix, experimenting with different sounds. Isaac was there every step of the way, guiding me through each step, offering feedback, and encouraging me when I felt unsure. It wasn't easy, and there were days when I felt like I couldn't go on. But then I'd think of Grandma Evelyn, of the promise I had made to her, and I'd push through. One evening, after a particularly long recording session, Isaac and I were sitting in the control room, listening to the final mix of the album. The room was quiet. The only sound the hum of the equipment. I felt a surge of pride. This was it. This was the culmination of everything I had worked for, everything I had feared I would never achieve. Isaac broke the silence with a quiet laugh. "You know," he said, glancing over at me, "when I first met you, you were a little unsure about all of this, about whether you could really make it." I chuckled, remembering how nervous I had been, how lost I had felt. Yeah, I was terrified. I thought I was just fooling myself. But now, I paused, looking around the room at the people who had helped make this happen. Now I know this is real. This is happening. Isaac nodded, his face softening with pride. "You've come a long way, Rachel. You're ready for this. You've got the heart, the talent, and the story. Now it's time to share it with the world." I smiled, a mix of gratitude and nervous excitement filling me. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. The music industry was tough, and there were no guarantees. But for the first time, I wasn't afraid of the challenge. I was ready. Ready to share my music, my story, and to step into the future I had once thought was impossible. The album was finished, and the world was about to hear it. And I was ready to let go of the fear, the doubt, and the uncertainty. I was ready to step into the light, to claim my place in this world of music that had always been mine. The day the album was released, I woke up with a mix of excitement and nervousness swirling in my stomach. I had poured everything into this music, every emotion, every fear, every ounce of my soul. And now it was out there for the world to hear. It felt surreal, like a dream I had been chasing for so long, and now it was unfolding before me in a way I couldn't quite process. I had worked tirelessly with Isaac and the team to bring this album to life, and now it was no longer mine. It belonged to everyone who would listen, everyone who would hear the story I was sharing. I sat in my apartment, staring at my phone, waiting for the first signs of what the world thought. Social media was buzzing with people sharing their thoughts, their reactions. I couldn't help but scroll through the comments, looking for something, anything that would tell me if the music was resonating with others the way it had resonated with me. Every new notification felt like a small wave of anticipation crashing over me. And then it happened. A comment caught my eye. "This album has helped me through so much," it read. "I've never heard music that felt so real, so full of heart. Thank you, Rachel, for sharing your soul with us." The floodgates opened. I spent the next hour reading comments, messages, and reviews, each one more moving than the last. People were listening. They were connecting with the music. It was working. One message stood out above the others. It was from a woman who said she had recently lost her mother, and listening to the album made her feel like her mother was still there, sharing the music with her. I felt a lump rise in my throat. My grandmother's memory was now alive in every note, every song. It wasn't just my story anymore. It was theirs too. Later that day, Isaac called me, his voice filled with excitement. "Rachel, do you see this?" he asked, sounding more energized than I had ever heard him. "Your album is climbing the charts. The reviews are pouring in. People are talking about your music, your story. This is it. You've made it." I could hardly believe it. The validation, the recognition, it was more than I had ever dreamed of. But more than that, it felt like a huge weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I wasn't just chasing success anymore. I was living it. I was doing what I loved, sharing the music that had been passed down to me, and people were responding. I wasn't just another struggling musician. I was Rachel, an artist who had something real to offer the world. In the days that followed, I found myself adjusting to this new life. There were interviews, radio spots, and performances, things I had always imagined but never thought I'd actually experience. Each moment felt surreal, like I was living someone else's life. But it was mine, and I was beginning to embrace it. One evening, after a performance in front of a small but packed crowd, I stood backstage, the applause still ringing in my ears. I looked at the violin in my hands and thought of Grandma Evelyn, of Isaac, and of all the people who had believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself. This was my moment, my chance to make a real impact. The journey wasn't over, but for the first time, I was excited to see where it would take me. The music, my music, was finally being heard, and I was ready to keep playing for as long as they'd listen. The success of the album was everything I had hoped for, and more. The recognition came slowly at first. Small victories, like hearing my songs on the radio, seeing fans share their stories, and watching the album climb the charts. It was overwhelming, but it felt right. It felt like I had finally found the place where I belonged. I had worked so hard for this, and the validation was sweet, but deeper than that, it was the connection with my listeners that meant the most to me. People were hearing my story, my grandmother's story, and they were relating to it. The music was no longer just mine. It was theirs too. Isaac and I talked about everything, from new projects to future goals. He was always full of ideas, always pushing for more. But something in me shifted as the months went on. The initial excitement of the album's success faded into something more profound, something that had always been there, but had been buried under the weight of self-doubt. I was more than just a musician now. I was a storyteller, a vessel for the emotions that ran through me and the music I had carried all these years. One night, after a show in Nashville, I found myself sitting alone on the rooftop of the venue, looking out over the city. The lights twinkled below me, and for the first time in ages, I felt a deep sense of peace. I had spent so many years wondering if I was good enough, if my music would ever reach anyone, if I was destined to always be a small-town girl with big dreams. But here I was, living a life I had only dreamed about, sharing my music with people who understood it. I thought about Grandma Evelyn and the promise I had made to her on that quiet pier. She had believed in me, in my talent, in my heart. But more than that, she had wanted me to embrace my journey, to live without fear of failure. I could still hear her voice in my head, urging me to take risks, to chase the dreams I thought were too big, too far out of reach. I thought about how much she had given me, not just the violin, but the courage to live authentically. And now, I was doing it. I pulled out my phone, scrolling through messages and social media posts from fans and friends alike. One message caught my eye. "Your music has been a light during a dark time in my life. Thank you for sharing your heart." I paused, reading it over and over. It wasn't just about the accolades or the success anymore. It was about making a real difference in people's lives, about giving them a voice through my own struggles and triumphs. That was the power of music, its ability to heal, to connect, and to inspire. The realization settled in, clear and strong. I wasn't just playing to succeed. I was playing because I had something to say, and the world was finally listening. Isaac called later that evening, his voice full of energy. "Rachel, you've got a big decision to make. We've been offered a tour, a nationwide tour. We're taking the next step. Are you ready for this?" I paused for a moment, letting the idea sink in. It was huge, bigger than anything I had ever imagined. But the truth was, I had already made my decision. I had already taken the biggest leap of all when I picked up that violin, when I finally let go of the fear and embraced who I was meant to be. The next step? It didn't scare me anymore. I was ready. "Yes," I said, my voice steady, "I'm ready." The best advice I can give is to embrace your dreams, no matter how impossible they may seem. Life is full of setbacks and self-doubt, but true growth comes from pushing through those moments of fear and uncertainty. Don't let the opinions of others dictate your path. And don't settle for safety if it means sacrificing your passions. Trust yourself, take risks, and understand that mistakes are part of the journey. You are the one who gets to decide your future. So be bold, stay true to who you are, and never stop chasing the dreams that set your soul on fire.